Disney's live action Lilo and Stitch remake has been out for about 2 weeks now at the time of this recording, and the reviews haven't been too positive. Now, while there are defenders here and there, most people would say the movie didn't quite hit the mark. Now, I've watched it myself and the original, of course, and while I think the movie isn't without any merit, but I do definitely think it could be better and executed better and be more faithful to the spirit of the original. Now, we all know the story. Stitch, a genetically engineered creature created by the evil scientist, Dr. Jumba Jukiba. And Stitch ends up escaping from the Galactic Council, or Agent Bleakley, I should say, and Jumba are sent to retrieve him. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Nani is struggling to keep her family together, and social services is threatening to take her little sister, Lilo. Stitch ends up meeting Nani and Lilo. They adopt him, they take him in, and as the movie goes on, Lilo teaches Stitch how to be a better person, and Stitch proves he's more than just a monster. He learns the meaning of Ohana, which is family, and the Galactic Council ends up allowing him to stay on Earth with his new family, and allowing Nani and Lilo to have a stable life with their support. So one thing that the original nailed itself in was the cultural representation of Hawaiian culture. Its themes, dances, language, and even the music were all greatly represented in the movie. And it even, on a deeper level, it subtly reflected the pain of Hawaiians' annexation, with the government forces threatening to tear families apart. And that's represented literally in the form of Cobra Bubbles trying to take away Lilo from Nani. Now, the live action doesn't really stick to all that very well in the movie. For about the first 30 minutes, it's pretty much shot for shot the same. Obviously, there's no Gantu, unfortunately. But after the 30 minutes are up, then that's when it all starts to go downhill. You see the changes, some big, some small, and we'll talk about them as we go on. For starters, Cobra Bubbles isn't Lilo's social worker anymore. He's replaced by a woman named Miss Cacao, and Cobra Bubbles is basically just the government agent in the movie. And also, Nani wants to go off to school to be a marine biologist, and obviously there's no Gantu, like I said before. And then Pleakley isn't a cross-dressing alien this time around. Now, I don't mind updating or changing things when you do any adaptation, but the change has to have some type of, it has to be executed well, and it has to be executed with intention, not just for the sake of change, and especially not because of budget constraints, right? So I want to rewrite the live action, and keeping what worked, taking away what didn't, and finding like a better balance to better portray what they want to do and how audiences would feel. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not doing a total overhaul of the movie and then rewriting it from scratch, like seeing what I necessarily would do. I want to still have their ideas. I'm just trying to execute them in a better way. Everyone and their mom has ideas on how a live action should go, but I just want to, even if it's not the ideal decision, I want to try and display their ideas in a better way. Now, I kind of want to make a disclaimer here. I am not any sort of professional any of that, right? I'm not a writer, producer, nothing. I am not bound by any budget, deadlines. I don't have any higher ups to answer to, and I have the benefit of hindsight. And finally, I am not a native Hawaiian at all, and I know next to nothing about Hawaiian culture and their customs. I'm just giving my creative opinion here. Now, I'm going to tell this in a more generic sense for the sake of time. I'm not going to give every detail of the movie, going through the movie. And I'm going to try to briefly explain the changes I'm making here. Obviously, the biggest change is Nani going off to school. leaving Lilo alone, not alone, but leaving Lilo with social services at the end of the movie. She does leave him with people that she considers family, and she technically does have a portal gun so she can see Lilo like literally whenever she wants. I understand why people are mad. I obviously wouldn't have chosen that. And from what I can understand, Native Hawaiians, they get a lot of benefits when they want to be a marine biologist and go to college, and maybe they get certain grants and it's cheaper, right? And so from what I've learned, it's way easier than going off to San Diego in California for her to study. It just makes more sense for her to stay there so she can actually look after Lilo. Even though I think the college is on a different island, but if she still has the portal gun, she can still see Lilo either way, and it's not, in the continental U.S. Now, I think one of the most ridiculous things that they did do was make Jumba the villain of the movie, pretty much, and not include Gantu. The directors said Gantu. I think there's a video on it. There's I think several interviews that they did, and I think they said Gantu isn't a grounded character, right? I guess he wanted to, make the story more grounded. You are still dealing with space aliens either way. I think because they just didn't want to animate him. He does like tower over like everyone else, right? So it is going to be more expensive to animate him. And from what I hear, this movie was supposed to come out on Disney Plus. So obviously they're not going to have as big of a budget, right? I think that's just it's a little bit of a cop out, right? Just because if you don't have the ability to make this correctly, then you probably shouldn't be making it at all. Even if it was coming out on Disney Plus, he should have been included in the movie regardless. But making Jumba the antagonist completely misses the whole point of, not the whole point, but it misses one of the points of the movie. Even though he was like a chaotic character, a mad scientist, he was still part of the comedic relief, right? After the movie, at least after the original movie, he's with the family. He buys Lilo and Stitch like those mini space cruisers, I want to call them. And he's Uncle Jumba. It's like, and not including him in the family just kind of messes up I know they're probably only going to make, the one live action movie for Lilo and Stitch, but it messes up the continuity. That just doesn't make any sense. They were just looking for an antagonist and they just put it on Jumba. At that point, if it was so hard to animate them, you could have at least made a new character. I mean, they added new characters, so you might as well add another one just for the purposes of filling in the role that Gantu was supposed to fill. But I digress. I'll start the rewrite here, right? So basically, at least for the first 30 minutes, I want to keep the movie completely intact, right? The one-for-one shot, and yes, that includes Gantu helping prosecute Jumba. And then Stitch escaping and Jumba and Pleakley going off to capture him. And then Stitch makes it to Earth. Now, one of the first changes I'm doing, I think I'm going to cut Tutu, I think is her name, the generous neighbor. I just think she's very unnecessary. While I do like the actress, she's not really needed in the movie. So that's the first thing. And then Cobra Bubbles and the social worker, I think I'm going to keep as separate characters, right? I think that's fine, but Bubbles still needs to be more involved, right? He needs more screen time. And I think letting him notice Stitch's crashed ship and getting involved in more comedic scenes, even though he was this big serious dude, he was still funny. And I'm not really trying to do any recasts. So if we were keep the current casting, since he's not this big brute, he might as well just be funnier, right? I think it's fine. Fast forward, we meet Nani and Lilo in their chaotic home, and Nani is overwhelmed. Lilo is acting out a lot. And then after the whole acting out and getting kicked out of Hula and everything, they have a heart-to-heart. This is where we'll probably find out that Nani wants to be a marine biologist. And what I was thinking is Nani teaches something about marine life to Lilo. Maybe in the original, she's obsessed with this fish named Pudge. While Pudge's species isn't specifically mentioned, they can just give him a species a fish in the live action, and then Nani can tell Lilo, I don't know, like they're not supposed to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because of their digestive system or something. Maybe Nani has a book and shows Lilo this book and tells her about sea turtles, etc., etc., right? I think that would be at least a good start for her to talk about her own desires. Just something to get her started with actually looking like or seeming like that she wants to be a marine biologist. And then the shooting star comes down and Lilo makes her wish to have a friend, have, the nicest angel they can send. The next day, Nani and Lilo go off to the adoption center and they find Stitch and they adopt Stitch, right? That way Tutu isn't there and Nani is there, showing that she actually, somewhat cares. I shouldn't say somewhat, but actually cares about Lilo. And we move along and we see Jumba and Pleakley trying to come up with a plan to capture Stitch, right? And I think just so it would be easier, I already know it would be easier, is to have them turn to humans. And it makes sense. They're from space. Like, they should have their technology, at least in this universe, to turn themselves into human or disguise themselves as human. Having not only their, I guess, bodies, their alien bodies, on top of you have to, put in the disguises, which would be, like, funny. But I think just having them, it's just easier, right? And I know I said I would avoid any recastings, but I think this one is pretty valid. I want to recast Pleakley. I want him to be a woman, a human woman. When he turns into have a human form, he's going to be a human woman. Now, I don't know which actress would capture his comedic energy and cowardice and expertise on certain things. I was thinking Aquafina would be a good candidate. I think she's pretty entertaining. But I feel like there are better choices, right? But I think having Pleakley really embrace Earth culture with dresses, wigs, selfies, etc., you name it, getting into the touristy nature that is in Hawaii, I think that helps him when he has to stay, right? It's going to make more sense. And no disrespect to, I think it's Billy Magnuson, though he did do a pretty decent job with what he had. I think it would just be in everyone's best interest if Pleakley was just like this touristy diva who's an expert on Earth. Right? I think that just makes sense. I don't see why they wouldn't do it. And they probably just want to use the same actor, and the CGI versions weren't going to show up that much anyway. No, I don't think so. Moving further along, we see Jumba and Pleakley follow Stitch around with Lilo while they're getting into their shenanigans. We can have the scene where they make a mess at Nani's job and unintentionally get Nani fired, etc., etc. We go back home. And, as Stitch enters, he's making a mess. He's being a dick pretty much. And then, we move upstairs with Lilo and Stitch. And as he's, doing crazy stuff, Lilo puts a lei on him to calm him down. Now, we don't know what necessarily the lei does for Stitch or what the lei is made of. I don't know. That would have been great to be explored. But, forget that right now. He puts a lei on him. He calms down. And Lilo kind of psychoanalyzes Stitch, which I think would be a good part. They did it in the original, saying Stitch doesn't have a family like Nani and Lilo don't have a proper family anymore. And she says that's why he acts out a lot, which I think is a great way to let people know Lilo does the same thing. She doesn't have her family anymore, or at least part of her family anymore, a very important part of her family, and she acts out a lot. Her sister, which was probably like her best friend before, it has to be her mom now, right? It has to be strict, keep her safe, etc., etc. During this little conversation, Stitch finds the Ugly Duckling book, which is very important for his character. It shows that he can relate to things, and we see Stitch start to have some type of realization at this point, all right? And then we continue to the next day, and Nani is looking for a job. Eventually, she finds a job doing surfing lessons. Now, I just want to pause here for a bit and just go on a little rant. It won't be that long. But in the live action Lilo and Stitch, he doesn't have enough warm moments than he did in the original. They pretty much make him look like a dick most of the movie. He comes off as very chaotic and conflicting. We just need more scenes where he's being humbled. He actually is trying to learn and be a better person. When Lilo is teaching him, he plays the guitar or just does something where we see that he's actually improving. In the live action, we just see Stitch. He's kind of trying, but he's like messing up a lot of things, which I don't think is fair for Stitch, because he's actually trying. We should actually see him succeeding a little bit, even though at the end of that scene, he does go a little crazy. But still, we see a softer side of Stitch, which makes us love him even more and makes them laugh at him even more, right? With Lilo teaching about Elvis. Now, I gotta look at why Lilo is so obsessed with Elvis, but it's great. I don't even think they said anything about Elvis in the live action. Maybe for, kind of obvious reasons, but I think it's fun. But we especially need that scene where Stitch is easing to go surfing with Nani, Lilo, and David, right? That shows he can be humble, he can be nice, and he can be curious, and he knows, I shouldn't say knows, but he's trying to look for something in this little family. We move along, and Lilo is drowning. Pretty much because of Stitch. Stitch accidentally brings her down with him. And the social worker finds out, because Nani doesn't have any insurance, pretty much. This Cacao encourages she give up custody of Lilo so all these expenses can be paid for and she can give Lilo like the best chance. And as the story goes on, they get a call from the council asking for an update. They say they're fired, and Jumba gets really frustrated because they're going to destroy his lab. That's his life's work. He wants to go off and just get Stitch himself and save his own lab. He can do it his way now. He doesn't have to follow any rules. As he arrives, at Lilo's house, he finds Stitch and he wants Stitch to come back with him, and he basically destroys Lilo's and Nani's house to try and capture Stitch. Stitch manages to fend him off for a little bit, but before he tells Stitch and Lilo, Stitch only chose her at that dog adoption center because he wanted to protect himself. And they look at each other. Stitch takes Lilo outside to take her away from all the danger. And when they're at a decent distance away, Lilo asks Stitch if Jumbo was serious in what he said. And that's when we see Stitch reveal himself to be an alien. His second pair of arms come out, his antennas, his back spikes come out, and he's revealed to be one of the aliens. So that confirms everything that Jumbo said. And Lilo gets real upset, real mad. She wants nothing to do with Stitch now, right? That's when we see Gantu just capture them, both of them, out of nowhere, like they did in the original. Stitch then escapes, and at this point, this is where the movie is going to play out basically like in the original. Stitch escapes, Jumbo and Pleakley end up capturing him, and Nani shows up and discovers the aliens. And she gets upset and asks them where Lilo is. And, she begs, pleads, and cries, but they tell her that's not really their priority, and they're only there for Stitch. And then Cobra Bubbles shows up and discovers the aliens, calls it in, said there's some type of disturbance or extraterrestrial, whatever, right? And Jumbo and Pleakley try to escape onto Jumbo's ship. And then Cobra Bubbles ends up trying to capture them. He catches Pleakley, but Jumbo ends up escaping onto his ship. Now, while on the ship and while he has custody of Stitch, they start having a conversation, and then he says to Stitch that he's going to turn Stitch into 627. I thought it was nice to keep that little Easter egg in there for the experiments, being shown on screen, or at least on the little monitor they have in there with their silhouettes. I thought that was pretty nice. As the conversation goes on, Stitch convinces Jumba to actually go back and save Lilo. He has a change of heart, and they go up to pick up Nani and then save Pleakley and pick up Pleakley. Obviously, Bubbles is very much against it, but, Nani is very insistent on going and getting her sister back. So they get picked up and they head straight to Gantu's ship. And this part is where they pretty much plays out like in the original. They have this big battle, funny moments here and there. Lilo is saved by Stitch, and they blow up the ship. And Lilo is stuck under the rubble. And Stitch, knowing he can't swim because he's going to become too heavy, he still goes underwater to save Lilo and lift the debris off her so she can float right back up. And then Lilo tries to save her, or tries to save Stitch, but Stitch is just too heavy. And then we see Nani and David go out to sea to save Lilo. And Lilo is begging Nani to save Stitch and reminding her of Ohana, how no one gets left behind. So Nani, in a great heroic moment, goes down to save Stitch, but again, he's too heavy to bring up to the surface. So she walks at the bottom of the seafloor all the way to shore, and they revive Stitch. Then, soon as Stitch is revived, he's taken into custody by the Galactic Federation. They speak, and Stitch shows that he's changed since he's been here. They have a heartwarming moment, and the council decides to let Stitch stay on Earth with Nani and Lilo. And for Nani studying marine biology, first, she's not gonna leave Hawaii. She's gonna stay, study locally, and she's gonna have the full support of her new extended family, which includes Stitch, Jumba, Pleakley, and the whole Galactic Federation, along with the Cobra Bubbles. And that way, I think we preserve most of the original message of the movie. A little more heart, a little more culture, and a lot more Ohana, right? And that's pretty much my whole remake of the movie. Now, I just want to add that I didn't really go over some of the smaller changes I want to make in the movie. I just wanted to tackle more of the bigger issues, at least for the sake of time. But, a couple of examples, I would have changed the way Nani speaks to Lilo in the live action. She speaks to her like she's always irritated, which it is an irritating situation. But in the original, she always spoke to Lilo in like a friendly manner, so she wouldn't hurt her feelings too bad, right? I would have changed the way she spoke Hawaiian, made her sound more authentic, at least, right? If we weren't going to recast. And then I would change the dialogue and general dynamic between Nani and David. In the live action, he's kind of like a bumbling idiot. Like, have them have better chemistry, especially in a live action like this, right? Where you can't really do a whole lot of like over-the-top animation, right? And then Jumba's accent, there is a guy I did want to recast. I want to avoid that, except for Pleakley, obviously. So I would have gave him an accent, and several other things. But the point is, the remake I just talked about. It isn't perfect, obviously. Even if it did have this, it would still have its problems. For it to be perfect, it would have. I'm pretty sure there are people out there with better ideas than me. But I just wanted to try and at least salvage it. At least in my own head, right? Now, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what changes you would have made. And let me know if you guys like these videos. Subscribe to the channel. And let me know what other movies or even shows you want me to rewrite. Thanks for watching.